First of all, explain to us what Gaza life is like when it's not in active conflict with Israel.
So, Alex, it's a great question. It's an important question to consider tonight because what happened in Israel was horrific, deadly, heartbreaking. And the Israeli government is obviously going to retaliate, as you mentioned there. There have already been retaliatory airstrikes, but there's talk of escalation, of a ground invasion, of, exacting a price. And you have to understand, when we talk about Gaza in the West, for a lot of people, it's very easy to conflate Hamas, which is a militant group that carries out acts of vicious terror, as they did this weekend, with Gaza, which is a place that contains 2.2 million people, Alex, half of them children. Half of the 2.2 million people are children, and it's one of the most densely populated places on planet Earth. You've got 2.2 million people crowded into 141 square miles. So they automatically become the victims of Israeli airstrikes because it's so crowded, because it's so densely populated. And it's basically like living, Alex, in an open-air prison. And those aren't my words. Those are the words of the former head of Israeli intelligence just a few months ago, Tamir Pardo. He said, "We're treating Gaza like an open-air prison." So that is the context. It is so important for us to remember when we talk about Gaza as some kind of, strange, faraway place, people shouting with guns. It's actually a real place with real people, families, and they're living in horrific conditions, Alex. 59% of Gazans live in poverty, 63% food insecure, 70% of young people unemployed, 90% of Gazans have no access to clean drinking water. The UN Secretary General called it hell on earth. How much more hellish is it going to get in the coming days?
I've tried to make this video several times, and I'm going to be completely transparent with you all. I feel like I'm out of my depth when discussing Palestine and Israel, because I'm still learning. But I never want you to confuse my silence with complicity. And there is one thing that I am capable of talking about, and that is my area of expertise, which is communications. And I want to talk about two words, and those words are killed and the word death. And I want to talk about how language shapes narratives. When we talk about a conflict, an armed conflict, people make the assumption that both sides are equally as tooled and have the exact same resources. And not only that, but that the risks and the liabilities are the same. So when we see the word conflict, we make assumptions about power balances and not power imbalances. So when we have international news media, particularly news outlets in the West, characterizing the casualties from one group as from them being killed versus another group from them just dying, dead, it always sends up a little flare in the back of my mind. Because this is the difference between active voice and passive voice. Israelis are being killed while Palestinians just die. Utilization of the word killed is an action word. It requires an actor versus somebody that is acted upon. Whereas the word dead is just a state of being. We're by and large not looking for perpetrators. We're by and large not looking for context. Death is just what happens, right? And I'm always wary when I see a political narrative being orchestrated to present one group of people for whom the consequences of being alive is merely death. Like, that's just what happens. Particularly when we already represent these groups of people as equally tooled and capable of violence. I want you all to pay attention to the words being used, okay? And be very careful with the words you are using. And never assume that history starts the moment you start paying attention. And I want to get serious with you for a second, and you know I enjoy my communications videos. But the swiftness with which America, Biden, and celebrities and influencers all so quickly and so swiftly aligned in anti-Palestinian arguments and narratives from the bottom of my heart fucking terrifies me. And I know this is not new, but there's something different this time. And I can't pinpoint my finger on it, but it absolutely terrifies me.
Honestly cannot believe that CNN actually allowed this interview to air. But hey, credit where credit is due. But more importantly, I think it can help all of us understand the tragic Israeli-Palestinian situation a little bit better.
But let me ask you, if that is the analogy you wish to draw, what Hamas is doing is they're targeting Israeli civilians. Is that not a classic terror? Isn't that classic terrorism? They're not fighting the Israeli government. They're fighting ordinary people.
Look, Farid, we have lived all our lives under occupation. My father lived under occupation. My daughter is living under occupation. We want a time when we, the Palestinians, will be free. Hamas was not there 30 years ago or 40 years ago. But before that, PLO was described as terrorist. Any Palestinian who struggles for his right or for freedom is described as terrorist. And the question here, do we have the right to struggle for freedom? Do we have the right to struggle for real democracy? Do we have the right to have normal democratic elections, which unfortunately Israel and the United States don't support? I think we are entitled to that. But the unfortunate thing, if we struggle in a military form, we are terrorists. If we struggle in a non-violent way, we are described as violent. If we even resist with words, we are described as provocators. If you support Palestinian and you are a foreigner, they describe you as anti-Semite. And if you are a Jewish person, and there are many of those, who supports Palestinian cause, they call him self-hating Jew. This should end. It doesn't make sense. We should all have equal life. We should all have peace. We should all have justice. And we should all live in dignity. The main way to achieve that is to end occupation, end the system of apartheid that I am sure no Jewish person can be proud of. Time has come for that, and time has come for justice and freedom. If we achieve that, there will be no violence and nobody will be hurt.
To respond to what's happening right now and the decision of the Prime Minister of Israel and the cabinet to declare war on Hamas?
Thank you for hosting me, and I would like to express my gratitude for the former speakers. All in all, was a very good friend of mine, and Raji, and I wish you, Raji, and all of you security, peace, and health, of course. First of all, allow me to begin with some personal, statements. My family lives in Israel. I'm at the moment in Mexico before this war began in a conference, in an international conference of leftist parties, including a delegation from Palestine. And we also had a press conference together, the Palestinian delegation and myself, because we share the ideas against the occupation and against war. I must say that unfortunately 2 days ago, I got a WhatsApp message from a very good friend of mine who was hiding with her husband in the kibbutz. And she told me she was very afraid and she could hear the Hamas fighters outside. Unfortunately, those were probably the last words she ever wrote, because she was murdered with her husband just after she sent me that message. A very good friend of mine was also against the occupation, a voter of our party. What I'm trying to say is that innocent people, innocent civilians of both sides, Israelis and Palestinians, pay the price of the arrogant, criminal, ongoing occupation that Israel refuses to end. And I want to say something very, very clear and very, very blunt. Nothing, absolutely nothing, can justify or legitimize the carnage that Hamas carried out in the towns and kibbutzim and the villages in the southern of Israel. Nothing can justify it. It is appalling. And even the occupation crimes, the crimes that Israel is guilty of, crimes of occupation, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, since the Nakba, those either cannot justify such a carnage. At the same time, nothing and absolutely nothing can justify the massacre that Israel carries out now in Gaza, not even the crimes of Hamas. So what I would like to say in the bottom line, that following what Orly and Raji said, and I totally agree with them, the Palestinians deserve the right. They deserve the national and individual rights. They deserve the right to be realized. the right of self-determination, to enjoy their own independent sovereign state, their own government, the freedom of movement. They deserve to feel to live in peace and security without the daily pogroms by fascist settlers under the auspices of the occupation forces and the encouragement of this fascist government of Ben-Gvir and Netanyahu. The Israelis deserve peace and security. They deserve to live in a state which doesn't occupy, which doesn't oppress. A state whose government is not a fascist and racist one. And I would like to conclude, if I may, by taking the whole issue into and explaining it within a political frame. Israel wanted this violence. In 2017, Smotrich was then a member of the Knesset, but at the moment, unfortunately, this racist thug is a minister of finance, but as well minister within the defense ministry. He published 6 years ago, and it is explicit. You can read it, and you can Google and read it. It was entitled The Subjugation Plan, which boils down to 3. First, the Palestinian occupied territories should be annexed to Israel as a whole without granting basic rights to the Palestinians. Second, those Palestinians who do not agree to live under this subjugation are going to be expelled from their homeland. And third, those Palestinians who are going to resist are going to be killed. What we see now, and the coup, by the way, that the government of Israel has been carrying out within Israel, all of those are means to that goal. The goal is to realize this horrific, racist, colonialist, fascist plan of Smotrich's. And the attack on Gaza is part of it. They use the terrible, horrifying, unacceptable carnage in the southern of Israel as an excuse to attack Gaza as part of the realization of this fascist subjugation plan. And we should stand together, join forces, all peace lovers, Palestinians and Israelis, Arabs, Jews, and the international community must stand together and join forces to say to Israel, you are going to end the occupation now. You are going to end the occupation. The Palestinians must be liberated. The liberation of the Palestinian people is a just cause. It will also liberate the Israelis from the occupation. Because although of course the Palestinians are the victims primarily, but the Israelis are victims of the occupation as well, as we just saw 2 days ago. So we must put the pressure on the government to end it. It's up to the international community. It's up to us to act together and against all violence in Gaza, in West Bank, and in Israel.
For Kassif, we're going to